One big concept in the React application is where state is going to live and how to manage state. We have different techniques based on the size of our application. So if we have a smaller application, like we have in our current project, there's a couple things that the React library gives us to deal with state. If we have a big enterprise application, we may need to go outside of React and install a package or a library such as Redux or Mobex, those big things for enterprise apps. But if you have a smaller application, 10 or 15 components, we can use the built-in features of React. And one of the features is lifting up state so that we can allow the parent and child communication. So lifting up state involves state management in that component hierarchy. So typically the parent component will manage the state of the application. The child components will have their own state, but we will have to somehow communicate from the child component back up to the parent. So if there's a counter in the child component will need to somehow communicate the value of it to the parent component, and the parent component could then notify all the other child components that the counter is now changed from 9 to 10. So one way to do this, though, is that the parent component is the source of truth. It has the main state. It passes down props to the other components, but the props are only read-only. So we need another mechanism to pass down to the components, so that the child component, so it can communicate with the parent. So we need, by lifting up this state to the top parent component, it centralizes the state management so that state, the source of truth, is in one component. We can improve our reusability by lifting up state. Child components just deal with rendering and receiving props. So it's easy, also very easy to debug by doing this, because we know exactly which component is holding the source of truth. So we know that parents pass data down via props to the child components. It's read-only, but it's one directional. But we need a way that child components can also communicate back and create a two-way channel between the parent and the child component. So how we do this is we pass events or functions, well, most likely functions that are triggered by events, but we pass a function through our props from the parent to the child, so that handle counter update could exist in the parent dashboard. And when we pass down handle counter update to the child component, whenever the child component has an event, say click a button to update the counter, it can invoke that function via a callback. It'll basically reference the call, and then by referencing that call, it'll call the parent function. And by doing this, we can pass data back and forth from the child to the parent. So it's actually a two-way communication mechanism. It's very flexible and reusable once you get it. It separates concerns, and it has a lot of advantages and makes things very flexible. The key is you just have to remember is that you're passing the function by reference. So when you pass it down to the component in props, whenever it is called, you're basically invoking that function in the parent component. To reference this example, we have a parent component that has two children, and it's passing the state down via props. So you can see the purple dot there is considered the state. Let's just say it's the counter. So it's coming from the parent to its two siblings, and perhaps maybe even to a nested child, a subcomponent of that first level child. So all of these child components are in sync with what is the counter, which is reflected in that purple dot. However, in the one child, if the counter is updated, then it's going to fire back an update function to the parent, which in turn will actually get the value that is the counter in that update function, update its own counter state, and then the whole tree is in sync. So anytime you're clicking that action in the one child component, it is firing the update function via props back to the parent. The parent is updating its own state, which is the counter state, and then passing the counter back down the component tree in the read-only props. This is how we provide updates to the parent, and this is how we keep our entire hierarchy of our application in sync by lifting up state. You could move that state management for the counter up to the parent so that all that component is doing is just rendering and passing back the value to the dashboard. And how it's passing it back is it's passing it back through props, but the function that was passed from the parent. So when we do this, we lift up state and we have the parent component manage the state and the child components are communicating. Now we have a two-way channel between our child components and our parent. We've done this already in the application, but for now we're actually discussing this technique, and it's pretty powerful. The next module, we're going to continue this and we're going to build out our search panel.